Feel free to check out my TeePublic after the video, and support me on Patreon. Watch till the end of the video for more. Special thanks to SCRYE Productions for the epic remaster of the King Kong vs. Godzilla theme. If you want to check out more of his music, then subscribe to SCRYE Productions on YouTube or Patreon. And another special thanks to Patreon supporter Thornton Wooding for commissioning this video. To become a patron, click the link in the description. King Kong 2005? More like King Kong 2 fucking long. Sorry, I had to, you know, right there. The influence the original King Kong from 1933 had on the history of film is truly unfathomable. Every filmmaker in any way, shape, or form owe themselves to this movie. It was that revolutionary. One of these filmmakers is none other than Academy Award-winning director Peter Jackson, most famously known for the Lord of the Rings trilogy. This movie was so influential in Jackson's career as a filmmaker that he even admitted to doing his own remake with his parents' Super 8mm camera when he was young, and even referenced Skull Island in his film Braindead. Upon the release of The Frighteners, Jackson was immediately on Universal's radar and even offered him to direct a remake of The Creature from the Black Lagoon in 1995, but Jackson decided to turn it down. And The Creature remake would eventually evolve into Guillermo del Toro's The Shape of Water. However, Universal was aware of Jackson's obsession with King Kong, and realizing that the character was technically in the public domain, they didn't have to worry about any legal red tape from RKO. Which, by the way, I did make an error in the last video concerning that topic related to Universal suing Dino De Laurentiis for remaking King Kong. Universal did have the rights to the King Kong character, as evident by the Toho Kong films, while RKO had the film rights, in which they shared those rights with De Laurentiis. It's confusing, I know, but I think that's right, maybe? I don't know, who knows, who's even keeping track anymore? So immediately Jackson accepted the offer and continued on with King Kong. Though with draft after draft, the movie wouldn't start production for a while. Shooting was meant to start in 1997 and was scheduled for a summer 1998 release, but Universal didn't want to compete with TriStar's Godzilla remake or Disney's Mighty Joe Young remake, so the project would be shelved as Jackson would then work on Lord of the Rings. But during post-production of The Return of the King in 2003, Universal realized the success of this trilogy and confronted Jackson again to revive the King Kong project. The scripts from 1996 would be rewritten and the film would be slated for a December 2005 release. A lot of the same team who worked with Jackson on Lord of the Rings would return for King Kong. Mainly Weta Workshop, who provided the visual effects, a great majority of the shoot would take place in New Zealand, and even Andy Serkis, who played Gollum, would return to portray Kong. Fitting how you go from one revolutionary effects performer to another. As a kid, I remember being so hyped up for this movie, and after watching it for the first time, I was immediately blown away. I remembered it being such a beautiful and breathtaking film that made me seek out the original, which would then become one of my all-time favorite films. But how does it hold up now? Do I still get that honeymoon high from over 15 years ago? Let's take a look. Well, the plot is basically the exact same as the original, but with a twist. We see more of Carl Denham, played by Jables, as he's trying to convince studio executives to allow him to proceed with finding the Pick of Destiny, shoot at an uncharted island. Yeah, after listening to Tenacious D, I can't look at Jack Black in this movie the same way. We also see more of Ann Darrow, played by Naomi Watts, as she's trying to find work after she's been let off, while trying to pursue her dream as an actress. Carl gets a crew together, we see Adrian Brody, and we're off to the races. We all know how this goes. What could this one possibly offer? Well, if you've seen Lord of the Rings, if you haven't, what the hell is wrong with you? Peter Jackson's got a real knack for world building, and he does an amazing job fleshing out 1930s New York and Skull Island. You really feel immersed in the setting in the same vein as the original. However, this actually does end up hurting the film a little. For starters, this movie has a grand runtime of 3 hours and 7 minutes, which is a little more than an hour long than the original, which ran at 2 hours and 5 minutes. Now, the runtime here isn't the issue. Sometimes movies can work well with a long runtime. It's how it is utilized. There's so much time dedicated to the world building that it hardly focuses on the characters at times. I can't even remember like half of these characters because they really don't feel that important. They have like 5 minutes in the spotlight and the movie either kills them off or just forgets about them altogether. Speaking of which, I'm down for gratuitous violence, but is this really necessary? This unfortunately results in the movie just feeling bloated, and it's a huge shame because these characters easily could have been fleshed out more, aside from Carl, Ann, and Jack. And while the visuals look beautiful for 2005 for the most part, they take up too much time, and the runtime easily could have been worth it. Also, as much as I adore Andy Serkis's portrayal of Kong and how expressive it is, I just wish it wasn't just an oversized silverback and more something along the lines of what came before and later. But putting my complaints aside, this is a rather solid film. I still enjoyed watching it, but it's those little problems I have that unfortunately refrain me from giving it a strong recommendation. Like, the acting is very good, the score is nice, it's shot extremely well, I especially love the callbacks to the original film with its dialogue and even music tracks that explicitly reference the original. But everything else just feels like padding. But despite my problems, Peter Jackson's King Kong would meet great success, going as far as to win multiple prestigious accolades and 2 planned sequels that were just part of an April Fool's joke. Damn. However, Universal did have a prequel planned, which would be announced at San Diego Comic-Con in 2014 with test footage. The film was going to be set in World War I and was simply titled Skull Island. However, after some behind-the-scenes negotiations, the project would then be given to Legendary and Warner Brothers, who at the time already released their Godzilla reboot with a sequel planned. And you know what's up. Legendary and Warner Brothers now had the rights to both Godzilla and Kong, and eventually started flirting with the idea of bringing them together in what would eventually culminate into the Monsterverse. And by flirting, I mean that same night they bought a hotel room, and I'll leave it at that. Skull Island would then be rewritten to take place during the Vietnam War within the Monsterverse and would find a director, Jordan Vogt Roberts. Thus, Kong Skull Island came to be. Briefly, Blue Nova and I touched upon this film back in History of Godzilla, but I figured it'd be a good time to go a little deeper. The film opens with a couple of opposing World War II fighter pilots who end up on Skull Island and come across Kong. Fast forward to 1973, 2 Monarch agents played by John Goodman and Corey Hawkins negotiate with a United States senator to proceed with an expedition to Skull Island to uncover what lies within the uncharted area. The expedition is a go, as Monarch has a military escort led by Colonel Packard, played by Samuel L. Jackson, as they're also joined by a tracker, played by Tom Hiddleston, and a photographer, played by Brie Larson. While dropping seismic charges, Kong appears and disrupts the operation, and the team is scattered across the island and seek to reunite, but along the way, they face the terrors of Skull Island. And one of the fighter pilots from the prologue, played by John C. Reilly, who is easily the best part in this film. The devils of the island are known as skull crawlers, who threaten the existence of our human protagonists, antagonists, and Kong, the protector of the island. First thing you're easily gonna notice is the stacked cast. I didn't even mention Gene Tian, Jason Mitchell, Thomas Mann, Shea Wiggum, John Ortiz, Mark Evan Jackson, Eugene Cordero, and Toby Kebbell, who'd provide the facial movements for Kong as Terry Notary did the motion capture. Hell, I had no idea Michael Keaton and J.K. Simmons were in this film until writing this video. And honestly, these characters are very good. They all have great chemistry with one another, and they're all memorable. And that's huge thanks to how well the dialogue is written. You truly feel like you're on the journey with them as they take on whatever threat comes their way. And by the way, these action scenes are pretty sweet. It's also rather disturbingly fitting that this film took influence from Apocalypse Now, as they share numerous stylistic and visual motifs, as well as an incredibly bizarre production history. In Kong Skull Island's case, Jordan Vogt Roberts was nearly beaten to death by a thug in a nightclub during the time they were shooting in Vietnam. and it's likely that he projected that violent experience into the film. And while I complained about the violence in Peter Jackson's King Kong, the violence here honestly feels more justified, as you really get a sense of how dangerous the island is. You really get the feeling that any one of these characters could end up in the belly of another beast. Also, love that soundtrack. The Chambers Brothers, Black Sabbath, Clarence Clearwater Revival, David Bowie, great stuff. Give me more. I want more. Overall, Kong Skull Island is a movie that knows what it is and fully embraces it. I honestly wouldn't even call it a bad movie. It's just solid all around. Man, I remember staying after the credits and seeing that little extra scene. I had a big smile on my face as I knew the Monsterverse was in full swing, and it was only a matter of time before the two biggest monster icons of cinema would clash in what would appear to be the battle for the ages. But that's a story for next time, ladies and gentlemen, because next time, you know what's up. And with that being said, thank you for watching. If you like what you see, then definitely consider supporting me on Patreon, where for $1, your name can appear at the end of every future upload. Other than that, you can also get early access to videos, exclusive content, commissioned video requests, and receive a t-shirt of your choice from my TeePublic. Once I reach enough patrons, I'll review Keitamamiya's famous Garo series. So if that's something you like to see, then go support me on Patreon. Feel free to like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and this is Titan Goji, signing off.